Welcome back to Season 3 of the podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Blackwood. As many of you know, I wrote my autobiography as a survivor of human trafficking called Custom Justice, but if you didn't know, you do now. Keeping in line with that, this entire season has been focused on interviewing people who did or plan to write about their own experiences as trauma survivors and how they overcame their past. If that sounds like you, reach out. We can talk about having you on the show, too. As much as we all hate commercials, they are a necessary evil these days. This is what keeps the show on the air. You can also show support by purchasing one of my mini books or donating through PayPal. You can find the links to either option in the podcast description. As always, a portion of the proceeds do go to local organizations that help fight human trafficking. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. Once again, I have an incredible guest this week. Her name is Carole. She's been through some crazy stuff, but she's had some wild adventures, it seems, too. I can't wait for her to be able to tell you the story. She's going to do it way more justice than I will. So as always, I'm going to welcome her to the show so she can tell you about it. Carole, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm excited to get to know you. My goodness. You've had a crazy life. So we're going to start this out on kind of the easy end of things. Tell us a little bit about where you were originally from. Where did you grow up?
I got to grow up on the waterfront of Texas, down near NASA. So my little town is called LaPorte. NASA was in Clear Lake, and I had like astronaut wives for Girl Scout leaders. It was really idyllic.
Wow, that's incredible. Oh my gosh.
It was a lot of fun.
I bet it was. You probably went to school with the kids of astronauts and went to Girl Scouts with the kids of astronauts.
Yep, and they're just like us.
Yeah.
Just like us.
They're just humans.
Yep.
So you've been through some crazy stuff. It started out when you were pretty young. I think I read something about 6 was kind of the first major shift. What happened?
Yeah, so my family was vacationing on a farm in Missouri, visiting our grandparents, and we were there because several of our family were gathering to attend a local funeral, someone they knew, right? So I had been the babysitter, and on the way back from the funeral, we got hit. We were turning into the farm, and the sheriff's son was racing his buddy up the other side of the hill after drinking, and we got hit and rolled down the hill and lost half my family that was in that car that day. So,
oh my gosh,
it was one of those really rare moments that movies really try to portray, where I was the only person who could climb out of the car and get help. And I could remember every detail of that day forever. And I think when you are able to remember and clearly walk through that scene, you handle it better than people who woke up later or don't remember much. And I think that was a blessing of that day.
That's got to be a lot of responsibility for a 6-year-old, though. Did you recognize that you had lost so many of your family members right at that moment?
No. I remember I was, again, blessed to look down on the scene in the car, and there wasn't a lot of blood. So everybody looked like they were asleep, kind of like dummies piled in a pile. And I do remember hearing labored breathing, which freaked me out. So I went to open the window. We were on our side. My right arm didn't work, so I had to try the left arm to get out. And as I was sitting on the side of the road with the young man who had driven up in a truck and lifted me out, I do remember asking, like, where's my brother? And he was like, what do you mean your brother? He's thinking the brother's at a daycare. And I go, no, my brother was sitting right next to me. I had my Barbie. He had his car. Where is he now? And this young man, I imagine he's in his early 20s, said, well, I'll be right back. And he went, and someone, I imagine she was a nurse. She didn't have a nurse's uniform on, but she was helping. And she came back. She was, well, honey, I just don't, are you sure? And I said, oh, no, no. He's 3. He was in the car right next to me. And of course, they had no idea. The tow truck was already hooked up and everything stopped and scrambled. And sure enough, they found him underneath the back seat. And so it was like that moment that I remember looking back on. I did not think about it for years, until later in my career. And someone asked the question, who did you become now because of the horrible things that happened? And I remember thinking back to that moment when that nurse came back to me and she said, Carole, I'm so glad that you spoke up, that you were brave enough to ask about your brother, because if you hadn't have asked, we wouldn't have found him and the car would have been towed.
Oh my
Because of your
gosh.
actions, right? Because of your actions, he will go with you to the hospital. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together until decades later when I realized, oh, that's why I speak up when I see people who are quiet being wronged. That's why I speak up when
Wow.
something needs to be said. That's where that comes from.
So that moment changed the trajectory of your life when you were only 6 years old.
It did, in a very unconscious way. I just
Yeah.
didn't know to give it credit. I mean, there was a lot of bad that went on. Like my dad never recovered. When my mom died, his mom had died just 5 months before. And of course, in that car accident, my mom and both her parents died. So his lifeline of support was left to be his dad. And they didn't have a really rich relationship. And my dad just, I mean, I technically lost both parents. My dad just
Yeah.
never recovered. He meant well. Nobody gets up any one day going, I can't wait to suck. You know, they just don't. Um, but when you're hurting, it's hard to look out for other people when you
Yeah.
hate the hurt you have.
Oh, it's
So there was a
heartbreaking
lot
for him.
that went bad for a long time.
Yeah. And you had another, was it another accident at 17?
Yeah, I should probably prepare your audience. I had 3 car accidents, all stopped and turning left, and then cancer. So I'll just lay the roadmap out for everybody because they're going to go, what? And what? And what? Yeah, I'm like that bad movie, 3 Weddings and a Funeral. It's just turning
Oh man.
all around, right? Um, yeah, when I was 17, I was coming back from getting, for the people who can remember this, the Olin Mills photos you have in high school. Um, and they were horrible. And I was mad and I was upset. And I'm driving home and I'm in one of these kind of tucked away left turn curvy things where you're just facing the way you want to go, but it's still technically a left turn. And a young woman, probably about the same age, who was ecstatic driving home fast because she just got her braces off, was tailgating a truck and she swung around to pass him as he was turning left and overcompensated. And I probably was already sticking out a little bit too because I didn't see anybody else but the truck. And wow, she just plowed into me. Um, and, you know, ironies of ironies, she lost a front tooth. Um,
Oh.
and I was in intensive care. So I was like, huh, interesting. Um,
Oh.
but I do remember, you know, and again, it's the same question. Who are you now in a great way because of the crap that you went through?
Right.
And the most notable memory that I could go back and start to connect the dots was I remember being in intensive care and the room was dark. And I remember overhearing in these moments where the painkiller was probably wearing off. Um, Someone says, yeah, the other driver said that they just never saw her. And I remember feeling in my gut, oh my God, this must be what it feels like to walk around and feel invisible.
Oof.
And somehow I knew that when I made my way finally after rehab and learning how to walk, and I had, you know, just I had a broken nose and a collapsed lung and a ruptured diaphragm and just,
Good
you know,
grief.
I know it was just massive. Um, I knew that when I went back to school, the one thing that I could control was that I would smile at everyone all the time. I wanted everybody who I saw to know that I saw them on that moment, on that day, and they weren't invisible.
Oh, that's cool.
And I just remember going, oh, that's why. I remember going back going, I just know I need to smile. And for a long time, I'm like, never gave it a second thought until I started to connect the dots.
And it
And
totally makes sense. I mean, you felt invisible. You didn't want other people to feel invisible, but also smiling at somebody can a lot of times make you feel seen too.
right. I mean, smiling is one of the scientifically proven, it's probably the only fake it till you make it thing that works.
Right.
It really is. You use so many muscles. The endorphins are almost immediate. The longer you smile, the more endorphins you get. The best exercise you can do for your face every day. But it is a fake it till you make it thing that actually works.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I've
I just remember
been,
smiling a lot.
yeah, I've been caught smiling in some of the darkest moments of my life, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You smile to make you feel better.
And there
So,
were, quite a few times in college, the habit of smiling would, bring on some unsolicited, date request. And it was like, oh, no, 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 no.
no,
I
that's not what
smile.
this is.
I smile at everyone. Sorry. No, no mixed messages. Um, and that's just interesting. So, I had a brilliant experience of meeting my husband on a blind date, and we had a long distance relationship. Moved him, and we were in Florida, and I'm driving my oldest of two, so my son, to a music choir thing at school, and we're going through a left turn light. The light was in my favor,
Oh no.
and a drunk driver um, plowed through his red light and just, hit the car. Now, thankfully, technology had started to catch up, and there was a Honda Civic, and it did its job. The front rolled under. Um, my son and I both hit the windshield because we had just undone our seat belts because papers in the back seat were flying around. The windows have been open. It's Florida. We're trying to catch them. Hadn't buckled back in as I'm rolling through. So for anybody, before you move, put your seatbelt on always. You just
Yes.
don't know. Um, and that wasn't so much of a real injury based car accident, but what it did do was give my son and I our first, a case of whiplash that was so bad that we actually thought our son's one leg was growing longer than the other. I'd never been to a chiropractor until then because, my parents were farmers from Missouri that didn't believe in that. And hard work would straighten everybody out, right? So we finally did go find a chiropractor. But what it taught me and how that helped shape me was you could only control your response to things. You can only control your attitude. And that's something I got to kind of start emulating for my son because he was uncomfortable. He had headaches. He quit baseball. I mean, there was a lot at 12 that
Oh.
he shouldn't have been asked or felt the need to do, but he just didn't feel good. We did, with chiropractic care, do a lot of great things, but it really taught me how intentional you need to be about talking, about handling your attitude, that it is something you can control. Happiness is a choice. What you
Right.
stress about is a choice. And that was a real turning point for me as a parent to walk the talk.
Wow. Oh, what
Because
a great lesson for him to learn from somebody that knows how to take lessons from these really difficult moments too.
well, and to his credit, he is a dad now of two young kids. And so he's
Oh.
exhausted. He's not thinking about, anything that I'm talking about now. He's like, what are you? I'm exhausted. What are you talking about? But as his kids get older, I'll remind him, hey, remember, this is your time. You get to be intentional. You get to walk the talk. It's time, Um, but I have to
Congratulations
say,
on being a grandmommy, though.
I'm very excited. I get to see them tomorrow, actually.
Oh my gosh. What do they call you?
Yaya.
Yaya. Oh,
They call me Yaya. No one in my family is Greek, which is why I'm called Yaya, because then no one fights over the name. We're Italian. There are nonas coming out of the wazoo. There are G's, there are Gigi's. And I go, and really, whatever you want to be called, doesn't matter. It's whatever your children will help your grandchildren call you that matters. So don't get too attached to some future grandparent name unless your children are all in agreement.
right. I'm expecting my first grandbaby very soon.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Yes.
So excited for you. Which makes, being here so much richer because we both know there are times in our life when we were like, yeah, not sure. Not sure if there's a tomorrow, not sure what tomorrow looks like, not sure I'm happy about tomorrow. There's just those moments that I truly appreciate. Again, happiness is a choice. I am not one of those people who is blessed to have what some of the assessments in the strength world call positivity. I have to choose it. I have to work on it. My husband has positivity as a very strong trait. So when he gets tired, he's still happy. When I get tired, I am so sad. I am so sad. And it's just, when I get tired, it's one of the things that when I start to feel sad, I go, oh, honey, you're tired. You better get some sleep.
Does he help you to stay positive?
It's funny. I think when you have a strength, you think it's so natural that you don't think it's a strength and that it's not your job to force it on anybody. He comes from a very independent family. In fact, one of the things that connected us was his father died in Vietnam the same summer or the same year my mom died in a car accident.
Oh
so
my gosh.
we both watched the opposite sex parent do parenting in very odd ways, whatever way they could muster at the time. So I grew up watching a dad. He grew up watching a mom. And to his mother's credit, there's a blessing and a burden here. So the blessing was he was raised by very independent working women. So he was independent, and he also expected all the women in his circle to be independent. I was being raised by very bigoted patriarchal men. So, I've got my feathers ruffled from a very early age. Like, what do you mean I'm invisible? What do you mean I don't matter? What do you mean? What? And so, but the burden side of my husband's situation was all the men in his family had died when their son was like 8 or 9.
Oof.
So his grandfather died when his father was 9, and his father died when my husband was 8. And of course, our firstborn was a son. You don't think I freaked out between the ages of 6 and 10 for this poor kid? I mean, just like, okay, just come home. Just come home. Just don't die. He's like, just stop being morbid, Carole. I'm like, no, trends. don't want this to be a curse.
Did your husband have that kind of a panic to him too?
If he did, he didn't voice it. We talked about it enough. We kind of joked about it. Like, okay, he's 7. He's in the range. You have to be careful. You have to, and it was just kind of an ongoing joke that we, had some serious roots that we didn't want to, fluster at all. Which was, it's very interesting. When we got together, we married, we'd been apart for a long time, been dating long distance. So we started to calculate, things started getting rocky really fast. So we started to calculate how many days we were actually in each other's presence before we were married. And over the 2+ years, it was only 6 weeks, which mainly were lust. So, you know, I still thought he was really good looking and cute, but wow, we had a lot to work on. And one of the best solutions he offered was because I got up thinking he'd wanted breakfast. So I got up and made him breakfast, just like I did my dad. And he wakes up and he's like, first of all, I don't eat breakfast. Two, I don't expect you to cook it. And three, I really don't have time to even eat it. And of course, for me, immediate tears. Because
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, he doesn't need me. Oh my God. I'm just all backwards thinking. I mean, from just poor training. And he came home and he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a menu for at night and on weekends. And whoever gets home first starts cooking, right? So whoever gets home first, whoever's the hungriest, we just call it the no whining policy. And we have had that for decades until he decided to take over all the cooking, which I happily blessed him with, like, oh, here, what can I do to make you know how appreciative I am? Yeah, when the kids left to go to college, I was like, it's no fun to cook for just two people because you eat for three and then you say you're too full and then you snore. It's just not going to work. But the real fork in the road was when, at the age of 49, I've been fighting for a year to get my doctor to take me seriously. And I finally go, well, obviously she's not going to listen to me. I'm going to get a second opinion. And as I'm sitting in the waiting room after surgery, after tests and surgeries, and I'm about to meet my oncology team, I am angry beyond angry that I had fallen prey to being kind of passed off, thinking I didn't know what I was talking about when it came to my own body. Mm-hmm. When I found out I had stage 3 cancer and went through my chemo, I couldn't taste anything. So my poor husband, one, had to learn how to cook quickly out of survival, but two, started watching the Food Network. And I just had to say, look, I love you, but the only thing that really tastes good to me is fruit and salt. So you can make whatever you want. And he just became the cook. And at a certain time I got well and I go, yeah, do you mind? Keep doing that? Because that's the one thing I don't want back. And he goes, absolutely. So he has just been a real trooper. But yeah, that interesting blow of not being taken seriously for a year and then having something that could have been so minimal become so not minimal. That journey was a very interesting journey to come out of.
I bet. I mean, your family probably was terrified for you. It's stage 3.
Yeah, I had to go home and I go, well, the good news is this stage 3. The bad news is there is no stage 5. So here's what we're going to do. I hope that everyone who is a huge raving fan of your podcast knows that there are these really interesting little blessings that happen right in the middle of trauma that you don't know, you don't appreciate until you have a little bit more perspective. But one of the things that happened was I had a friend who was had a mother. She had been tested. She had the BRCA genes for different types of female cancers. And just in passing, right before I learned of the news, she says, if you ever get a diagnosis that scares you, call me. Well, there you go. So I immediately called her. And she says, okay, you need to get this book, you need to watch this video. And she goes, you need to choose what you want to control, and you need to choose what you can control. And that was a really interesting thing to say. So she turned me on to all the research that had been done about diet and diseases. And we've all heard that a lot of people are recommended to do certain types of diets for certain types of chemo. And the chemo drug cocktails are all different. So when someone says they're going through chemo, they're not the same. So I had one cocktail, whereas my friend going through breast cancer had a different cocktail. And so I chose to do a huge diet shift. I chose to really lean into meditation and any type of comfort care that anybody was willing to share with me. I'd try at least once or twice. I had found a Navy SEAL who was doing Reiki, and I'd never had
Wow.
it. And it was just kind of like, well, that just sounds kind of fluffy. You're going to roll your hands in midair over my body. Okay. I don't have to get undressed. That's good. But between meditation, a change in diet, I kept going to the gym, even when I lost all my hair, even when I didn't feel like going, I at least went, went, um, and did something. I learned I could control my thoughts. I can control what I put in my body. I can control what I did with my body. And that is pretty much what it takes just to change everything.
Yeah.
The mental state, understanding my brain was my hard drive. And I had to make sure my hard drive was in optimal working order. And the value of meditation is if you do it when you finally reach that point where you've experienced even a couple minutes of just brain quieting, I didn't realize that is the only time your body goes, oh, thank God you stopped thinking. Now we can heal ourselves. Because technically, every single thought you have, your body's prepared to actually act on it.
Wow.
And that was a big why behind why to do meditation when you are fighting something health-wise. I had no idea that's the only time your body gets to clean house, other than sleeping. And if you're a good sleeper, then you feel that. If you're not a good sleeper, you need to figure that out. Pay attention because your body needs it.
Yes.
But I did learn to be my own advocate. I would have to say that understanding how long I had waited before I acted, waiting almost cost me my life. And here's the funny thing I realized, because I was at the same time, I was going through a master's program. I was working for a consulting firm remote and trying to go through chemo and radiation while trying to learn statistics. Not a good combination. Just saying. It's a horrible combination. I know what to do with statistic results. I don't know how to get them now because of that. But I immediately got mad about waiting. And then I realized I waited in a lot of areas of work too. And that was a huge catalyst for me to stop waiting. But when you say that, you're like, okay, cool, stop waiting. And then everybody's like, and then what? And I go,
Right.
yes, you stop waiting. Then you start asking. You start asking for the information you need. And that's what trips everybody up, because we are so conditioned to not ask anything at all. So I was curious, why don't we ask? Well, we're conditioned out in school. As soon as we started teaching to the test, it was memorization and regurgitation. We kind of
Yes.
quelched critical thinking. And when you quelch critical thinking, you quelch questions. Period. So we are in a absorption stage from the time we get to maybe first grade all the way through college. And then suddenly you graduate college and they go, okay, we want you to critically analyze and ask great questions and step into work and know what you're doing. And everybody's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't know what I'm doing. And
Yep.
what was interesting is I just kept seeking. I'm apparently one of these, infinite learners. And when I learned that the brain is only scanning the universe for two things all the time, it explained so much. So the brain's always scanning for where do we fit and where do we grow next. That's it, all the time. So think about social media. You scroll things you like, and then you get interested and you want to know more. So then you scroll, where do I want to fit next? How do I grow to get there? It's an infinity loop of brilliance that sucks you in. And that's
Very
the
cool.
same thing we want from work. Where do I fit and where can I grow next? Meaning, what am I currently doing right that you don't want me to change? And where can I grow next so that I can change what I have to change? Those are the
That's
questions we
awesome.
want to ask.
Yeah.
But instead we go, so how can I improve? I hate that question. And the reason I hate that question is because it makes the other person think that you think you're broken and you need fixing. So they get to be the fixer. So they start to offer you things that you're really doing wrong in their perspective. And that's not what really wanted at all. You're just wanting to know, okay, what am I doing right? What do you brag about? What do you like about what I'm doing? And then once I know that, where do you think I can grow next? Those are the questions we want to ask. So I learned this when I was really struggling in school, really struggling in that remote consulting job and trying to go to school. And I kept asking the doctors, what do we measure when we know what's going right? What do we measure when we know what's going right? And at first they were like, we're here to fix things. I said, no, I'm not broken. I just have a glitch in my hard drive that's really wreaking havoc on my body. What should I be measuring when it's going right? And they said, okay, when you go for your blood test, here are the blood markers. Here's what you really want to be, and here's where you don't want to be. And it caused a different conversation. And so I took that and I started researching, well, who else does this? There's a organizational approach called appreciative inquiry, which is what they do is they sit down and say, okay, what's going right? What are we all doing right? And what that does is allow them to go, okay, so if this went right, how do we apply that to this new problem? And that's when I go, oh, what if I go about everything? And my first question is, so what's going right?
That
And the
is
brilliance of that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you're okay. I was just thinking this is groundbreaking. This is brilliant. This is amazing.
So my next thought was when you're going through crap, when you're going through trauma. I mean, I was going through cancer and I literally go, so what's going right? Ironic, right? They're going, I think she's lost her mind. Has she been drinking? I don't know. What did you give her? Right? I don't know. I said, no. I need to go back to my family and tell them what's working. I need to know what's going right. You get what you focus on. So I need to train my brain to focus on what's working so I don't stop doing that. And when I ask that question now, what's going right? It's not flippant. There is a neuroscientific background here because when you're forced to go, well, okay, I remember my underwear, I matched my socks today. Okay, I got up. Fine. When you start to give yourself credit for what is going right, it balances out and neutralizes the negative feelings too. It balances the scorecard emotionally. And that was a lifeline.
That's amazing. Do you think that's what got you through all of this?
I would say that was a big yes, because
Yeah.
when you feel like you can control something, it gives you power. It makes you a player in the game, not a victim. And we all need a little autonomy to feel like we're in some control of our destiny.
I love how you took control. I mean, all of these things kept on piling up. You could have been a completely different person if you allowed these traumas to kind of beat you down, because it was definitely trying to, but you just kept on fighting. You had
Yeah,
family you got to go back for.
right. It wasn't until just a few years ago that we were laughing. My mom, bless her heart, took her 9 years to have me, 9 years to have, 3 years later, my brother. She felt that it was a sign of good luck if your kid's initials spelled something. So my initials spelled cat and my brother's spelled jet. And I had to laugh. I said, well, even though I married, one letter out of that, um, I don't want to have 9 lives. I really don't want to keep this trial going. I said, but I'm very grateful I have the ability to have just another life past the last one. And maybe that was the blessing with the initial spelling cat. And ironically, my brother, even though he had a career in the Marines, he now works in rocketry and unmanned aerial vehicles. So
oh my gosh.
it's just the funniest things. Looking back, perspective gives you blessings and humor. But for every blessing, there was a burden. And for every burden, there will be a blessing. You just have to choose to find it.
Always. Who would you say inspires you the most?
Oh, and I know this is going to sound so cliched. I have always admired Rosa Parks.
Oh, very cool.
Because she, in the midst of a huge social norm, she was mad enough, tired enough, the stars aligned that she just couldn't see why to get out of that seat. And it took probably just a lot of exhaustion. But if she had tried to plan that, she would have chickened out. Right? We plan things like, okay, no, it's not going to work today. I'll just stand up. So let's just say that a lot of buildup helped her in that moment of social visibility. But it taught me that sometimes you need to not think and trust those instincts to stand up, to speak up, to smile at someone, to reach out and shake the hand and get to know the name of a homeless person. Whatever it is, sometimes your gut is a lot smarter than the social norms you're trying to sit in.
Wow.
And she just inspires me because she put her life on the line and her family's life on the line in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. At that point in time, it absolutely was taking her life in her own hands. Everything was up and upheaval.
Yeah. And that, I don't know how much exhaustion I would have had to have experienced to be as brave, but I just always think of her. I don't know her. I never got to know her. Right. But I think of that moment in time, that one gesture, one moment of exasperated impatience, built up anger, built up, social unjust, just helped a nation see differently.
That's pretty powerful. Carole, do you happen to have your book handy? Would you be able to read a little bit of it for the audience?
I do. It's funny because I had it out here and someone moved it, but I have right here.
Okay. And what's your book called?
They're going to laugh. It's called The Ask Framework. Such a brilliantly creative title.
What, you know what the book is about this way. That's what a book title's all about, right?
That's right. Let me find the page I had marked here. It's kind of the first chapter, ironically, is the longest because there was a point in time when I realized, and this is before the cancer diagnosis. This was just in a working situation, that I was in a performance review that was going completely wrong. And I, sadly, your audience may be able to relate with this, even though you'd like it to be a one-off and not recognizable. So I'll just read a couple pages.
Okay.
I sat frustrated, gripping the steering wheel while still sitting in the parking garage before heading home. white-knuckled and internally yelling at myself. I couldn't believe I found myself on the receiving end of a lunch with two bosses who fumbled their way through what was supposed to be a performance review. 12 months of suffering in a role that left me unchallenged, unmotivated, and unfulfilled. And now with no information of where to grow in the organization, I felt lost. We've all had a bad day. We've seen this scene in a movie that caused the character to grow, change, or see the world differently. For me, this was one of those days that started a chain reaction to now. A simple performance review that finally revealed what I had suspected all along. I was working for a person in a role above their experience, and I was paying for it on the short end of the underappreciated, underpaid, and overlooked stick. Prior to this, I had never been reviewed as anything less than a rock star in my abilities as a professional. What had gone so wrong? Sitting at an awkward lunch, the founder of the company and my immediate boss were sitting across from me. These were people I trusted to step up to recognize my contributions. Instead of talking about the significant work I had accomplished, the projects I had started and completed, what I had added to the organization, and how well I'd done, my boss joked and made fun of my small discrepancies, grammatical errors, and insignificant mistakes in my work, leaving me feeling picked on and belittled. I sat there dumbstruck. At no time did either my boss or her boss take my performance review seriously. What was going on? Anytime there was a pause, as if to say, okay, let's get to the real reason we're here, the joking started all over again, as if on repeat by default. I was rendered speechless. Did my boss really know what to do in a performance review? Especially in front of the boss? Making a joke about my mistakes seemed to be the only point. Would this ever end? Wouldn't either of them take the initiative to ask about my contributions? My brain seemed paralyzed to intervene. Then my gut started to talk, as loud as a banging drum. The overwhelming screaming from my gut said, quit now. Politely put in your 2 weeks notice and turn this into an exit interview. Now, get the right attention of how badly this all went and move on. Move on? Without a job to go to? Oh, the angel and the devil were at war, sitting on either side of my head, begging me to act. Instead, I sat frozen at that lunch, as if watching a horror show. And now, in my car, I sat fuming. And then it slowly dawned on me. I wasn't fuming because of the performance review. I was fuming because I was so mad at myself for having sat there, a mute and silent witness to such a bad showcase of management. Even worse, I had settled for such a crappy job in the first place, and deep down I had known this was a poor job fit from the beginning, almost as soon as I started working there. And I'll stop right there.
Wow.
That was a bad day. That was just a bad day.
I can absolutely identify with that too. I've had those days, but you just made it so clear to me that for the first time, looking back on this stuff, for the first time, I can recognize that I wasn't mad at them. I was mad at myself for putting up with it for as long as I had.
Yep.
I don't think I'd ever realized that before. Unbelievable.
Yeah, we are funny human beings. That is for sure.
Oh my gosh. I figured I can make this work. Oh, good Lord. I did that with relationships in my life too. I can make this work.
It's funny. I think just in the last 4 or 5 years of research, the crystallizing release from taking on other people's emotions. So to your point, we as humans don't know what to do with negative feelings. If our brain is scanning the world for where do we fit and where to grow next, there's no room for the negative. So when we don't feel good, when we feel mad, when we feel agitated, when we feel anything, we try and get rid of it. And we don't do that well at all because we project out. So we blame somebody, we blame a situation, we blame. We're like throwing mud on the wall. We just want to get rid of it. And the same is true when you're on the receiving end of someone's emotions. Like, I can't believe you did this and you did this. So here's what I've realized. If you're the person that someone's trying to project on, it has nothing to do with you. It's all about the person who has the feeling. Yeah. So while I was mad at that situation, I was madder at myself. So I coach people often, especially in the work world, because people get aggravated and frustrated and mad and they just project out and they'll blame somebody, anybody, anything. If you're a leader and someone comes at you and they're mad, knowing it has nothing to do with you, seriously, it has nothing to do with the person being yelled at. They may have triggered something, but you can't make somebody feel anything. The best thing you can do as the person on the receiving end of any negative emotions is to recognize it's not about you. That's number one. 2, recognize the person doesn't know what to do with their feelings, so they're projecting, even if it's something that they say you triggered. And 3rd, the best thing you can do is acknowledge, whoa, you are feeling some sense of frustration. Ask them, what is frustrating you the most? The moment you ask that of them, they have permission now to talk about their feelings. And the moment they start talking about their feelings, it neutralizes the height of that feeling. It has to come down because now they have to think about it and describe it. So they have to stop feeling the feeling to talk about the feeling. Weird how our brain works. But when they get to talk about their feeling, you get credit for being a great listener because all they need to do is talk about their feeling. They just didn't know how.
Right. They had to get it out somehow.
Yeah, and we're messy.
Yes.
We don't care what kind of mess we make. We're just trying to get rid of negative feelings.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of emotional intelligence to even stop and ask yourself, okay, wow, I'm feeling a lot. What is frustrating me the most? And if you do, it is very beneficial to bring it to the most because your brain knows exactly what means the most and it'll just pop out. I don't feel respected. I don't feel appreciated. I feel taken advantage of. Okay. The moment you name it, you know what to do about it.
Very cool. Definitely taking back a lot of power rather than just venting frustrations everywhere.
Yeah. I can only imagine. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. If somebody wants to reach out to you to talk to you about possibly being under your guidance-ship for coaching, or if they want to grab a copy of your book, where would they reach out to you?
2 places. And they can just reach out and have a conversation. I'm happy to just connect with the world because sometimes we just need to connect with somebody who's been through equal amount of crap, right?
Right.
I have a website, relevant-insight.com. You can find the book, The Ask Framework, on Amazon. But I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. And my name is spelled a little differently than most. So I have Carole with an E on the end. And then my last name is Stizza. So Carole Stizza on LinkedIn, and happy to connect, even if it's just to send you a virtual hug.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that I include all of those links in the description of the podcast too, so that people can have an easy place to be able to locate this if they have that ability. I know a lot of people that listen to my podcast do it while they're driving, so I don't suggest that, but come back to it later.
Definitely don't do that.
Yeah.
Especially after my story. Okay. Just
right. And there's always one last question that I ask my guests before I let them go. And it's my favorite question of the whole interview. What's one thing that you love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance?
One thing I love about myself, and it baffles my family, is that I believe kindness is the biggest gift that I can give people. And I just, that's the way I think.
I have to commend you on that. You know, it's tough surviving repeated traumas and going through all of this and not becoming jaded to the world for what it is that you've lost or gone through. But you've come through all of this with such a beautiful perspective of the world and such a beautiful light spirit. You're just such an incredible person.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I just have to remind myself that nobody gets up any one day going, I can't wait to suck today. They're all trying to be their best. And if they are, God help me if I can see that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, that's a good motto to have. Nobody wakes up saying, I can't wait to suck today.
Right. That's right.
I mean, I have to put that on a sticky note on my mirror.
That's right. It does keep me being a little kinder than sometimes I feel like it, but sure. Yeah.
I know a few people that need to have this tattooed on their forearm.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Oh, Carole, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I've gotten so much out of this. I really appreciate you. This has just been fantastic.
Oh, thanks for spending time with me as well. And thanks for having a place where people can go to listen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the best way to be able to recover, is to hear that other people can do it. You can do it too.
You are not alone. Oof.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. There you're going to find links on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight-fisted, but I can say that I work for myself. In short, this show really is all about the guest. If you've enjoyed their interview, please feel free to let them know. You can also tune into my other podcast, Growth from Darkness, which is co-hosted by a lovely lady from Australia. We talk about what trauma responses are and healthy ways to move beyond the past. For more information, just go to growthfromdarkness.com. It might be a couple of days late, but happy birthday, America.